Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go! Hey everybody, it's George. Welcome to Flashback Fridays. This flashback is a special one for me because it was done a little over a year ago, and this video was never intended to be a video in the first place. This was originally a Periscope I did at the last minute right before we were starting an Ephemera show at Epic Antique Mall in Seattle. And Epic's a great mall. You can see some videos I've done recently that show the mall in all its glory, but it was brand new, had just opened, and they decided to do this event in a vault that now is full of vintage clothes and some really amazing furniture and antiques. But at the time it was a big empty room, so we decided, a bunch of us dealers, to get together and bring all of our ephemeral items. And I should say a little about what ephemera means, because it's one of those $10 words. Ephemera basically means if it's ephemeral, it's in the moment. It's not really intended to last. So think in terms of things related to events like concerts and shows, or political campaigns, or things that are of the moment and things that are made to promote or celebrate or advertise that moment, but are not intended to go on after that. And that's what ephemera is. And so this show was really fun. A lot of people came. We sold a bunch of stuff. And I am excited to show you what it looks like, because there was so much interesting stuff and I had such a quick period to show you when I did the original video that I didn't really get to talk about the stuff as much. So we're going to do some pausing and take a look at it, and let's show you what it looked like then. Good morning, viewers. Thank you for joining us. We are here in Seattle. I'm George, the Antique Nomad, at the Antique Nomad on Periscope. Okay, I'm going to mute that guy a little bit more than I usually do so that you guys don't have to listen to two of us talking over each other. But you can see in the background, the main part of the mall had just filled up with a lot of furniture. Like I say, it was brand new. And then we come into this room, and you can look around and see there is a lot of really cool stuff in here. And again, it's all ephemera. It's posters, it's patterns, it's school books, it's things that were printed, paper goods. You can see us setting up, and right there's a bunch of Dick, Jane, and Sally, a teacher's instructional thing. I ended up buying that, and I just sold it about a month ago and got about $100 for the set of them. This gal's really cute. She is a punch card. I'm going to pause for a minute so you can see her. And the punch boards, they still have these at taverns now where you pay a certain amount of money and you punch with a little punch tool, and out comes a little slip of paper that tells you what you won. Well, back then it was not legal to gamble everywhere, so this one you won chocolate, but you got to look at a very cute pinup girl in the meantime. I think she sold for $25 or $30. And then you're going to see down here a bunch, again, ephemeral items. Here's a bunch of interesting old political memorabilia, and these are late 60s and early 70s, so some of these are counterculture, and the counterculture ones are the hardest to find. You'll see stuff with Free Huey, which had to do with, well, kind of the predecessor of the BLM movement, I guess. Jerry Brown, Pat Brown, all sorts of people who are now historic names in politics, but were current at the time those were made. So those sold pretty well, actually. I think we were getting between $5 and $15 a piece for them then, and they still are pretty collectible. I'm going to move my head out of the way so you can see some of this stuff. This is really neat here because this is Hawaiian Mother Goose, and it's based on nonsense rhymes by Tutu Nene, which is this is very popular in Hawaii. It's a well-known collectible item. Anything that's Hawaiian territory does well. And there were a bunch of cool children's related books. Paint Without Paints is a coloring book, essentially, from the 1930s. Very pretty graphics there, and you see that one with the streamlined train in the car. The Happy Book, who doesn't need a happy book? And then Three Little Kittens. That one is a Victorian with the early chromolithography cover, and it's just really cool. I like how the cat is actually the master of the other cat as a puppet or a marionette. There's another 3 little kittens. We also did, these are ephemeral in that these are collector's reference books, and there aren't many of those being made new these days. I wrote the Treasure Craft book. That's been out for, gosh, 15 years now, and the prices in it are pretty true. The prices in a lot of these reflect the old days when pricing was different than it is now, but they're really great if you want to take a deeper dive into a topic because they're well studied. They show lots of examples. So for new collectors or new resellers, they are still pretty useful. And now there's 4 little kittens. Those kittens just keep on multiplying everywhere you look. Those are cute. The Empire Strikes Back. Again, that was related to the movie. That's why it's ephemera. Thornton Burgess did a lot of cute kids books with frogs and the like. And then we get into some art books here. Nothing new vintage, and that one's priced down to 10. This one's very sweet because it's Cupid's book, and it's got the little Cupid on it with the wings. That was popular about 1911 when Rosie O'Neill came up with that design. And we've got some Wizard of Oz. On the left, I'm going to move out of the way again. On the left here, you've got the 1950s era covers, which are really bright and colorful. And then to the right, you have one which is actually just a little bit earlier, 1930s or so. The originals from the 1902 to 1920 period are the most valuable, though. And this is a bunch of Bringing Up Father. That was a good cartoon. Top Cat from the 60s. This here is neat. This is a pop-up, and pop-ups are very popular. This particular one was done by a famous Czech artist, and it was the only thing they would allow him to do that could be sold and exported to the West. So these sell for about $30 a piece. Pop-ups in general are very collectible if you can find them in good condition. Even more recent ones sell really well. Now we're going to get into some concert posters. Mott the Hoople with the woman with all the faces in her hair. They were a well-known band in England particularly, and that's going to be from about 1970. I just like any of that stuff that's surrealism. Johnny and the Distractions, of course, that's a later one. And then here we've got one, this one you see in my intro. This one is Jefferson Airplane, one of my personal favorite bands from the psychedelic era. And this one is showing their show coming up in the Civic Auditorium, and that would have been in Portland, Oregon, I believe. So this is when they came to the Northwest on tour, probably around 1968. The surrealistic graphics are just really fun in the concert posters from this era, and they do very well. I think that's a $300 piece, if I'm not mistaken. Now, here we have some neat graphics. These are various magazines that are, again, ephemeral because they're meant to last a month or a few weeks or for one show. You see the gal on the right there, and that's from the Stardust in Las Vegas, so that's a show program. We're going to see this guy here, Elvis, of course, and that's Elvis paper dolls. And, well, Elvis himself turned out to be kind of ephemeral. He wasn't alive much longer than that. Now, these here are Physique Pictorials, and they are tame enough to show on YouTube until you get to the late 1960s, and then they're not so tame anymore. They were physique magazines, which was a clever way back in the days before nudity in magazines was widely accepted to be able to show semi-clad people in their true form. And then underneath them are Mr. America. Now those were legitimate bodybuilding magazines, so the one is not to be confused with the other. Then you've got, for the other set, you've got the Eagle Club. There is a pinup, and she is a semi-nude, which you can't see because we have her discreetly tucked away. You see the 3-digit phone number. This is from a little town in Nevada, so that's going to date back to the 1940s. Movie ephemera is really a fun thing. Lobby cards and posters, and people really enjoy buying this sort of thing and collecting it. It's so nice to be able to slow this down and show you better than I could when I did this video originally. I can see why this video has not been one of my more popular because you just really couldn't focus long enough. So now we get a chance. Don Knotts, of course, known by younger people for Three's Company and older people for the Andy Griffith Show, but he did a number of Disney movies, and The Reluctant Astronaut was one of them. And then you have an older one with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in some sort of a thriller. There is Donald Duck, again, psychedelic era. They like to take Disney characters and illegally reproduce them in all sorts of ways, and some of those pieces are actually pretty valuable now. They were not sanctioned by Disney. The scribble pad on the right was, though. And let's see in here, TV Guide. That's another ephemeral thing that really sells pretty well now because all sorts of famous characters are on it. There's Mr. Rogers on the TV news. And let's see what else we have in here. I think there was an I Dream of Jeannie, if I remember right. There is Jerry Lewis from the Telethon. And people do collect old TV guides. They're not really produced in this manner anymore. So people like them for the I Love Lucy is collectible. You know, you get your more famous people. There's all sorts of TV and motion picture annuals. And depending on the star on the cover, they can be worth a few bucks or more depending. There's our guy again. Let me move out of his way. Jerry Lewis in Geisha Boy. I'm sure that was a stunning movie. Yeah. Jerry Lewis did a lot of oddball slapstick stuff, that's for sure. And then next to it you have Wild Evil with 13 Frightened Something. I can't quite make that one out. A couple of games here. This one here, Green Acres. That one I just love. I really enjoyed that show. I have to admit there were aspects of it that reminded me of my growing up, because my mom was definitely not cut out for country living, and my dad decided to move us to a place in the country, and the first thing she did was call the police because she heard someone screaming for help, and it turned out it was the neighbor's peacocks, and the police said, "Welcome to town, don't call us again." So I relate a lot to the Green Acres, especially Ava Gabor and her attempts to deal with having nice, beautiful Hollywood Regency things in a falling down farmhouse. It's all very familiar to me. Anyway, I got a kick out of that show. And, you know, those old TV show games are worth $25, $30 and more depending. Now, this is Peter Max, and Peter Max is still regarded as a very well-known, very famous artist. He was originally from Germany, but mainly worked in America. Again, there's this late 60s, early 70s psychedelic sensibility to it. He did the stamp, the official U.S. postage stamp celebrating the 1974 Spokane World's Fair, amongst his other commissions. This was when he was doing a lot of printed wear on scarves and things, and scarves as headbands were very popular in the early 70s. So this was being sold at the old J. Jacobs stores that used to be in Seattle. And I believe this sold for $30, if I'm not mistaken, because the scarves sell for about $50 a piece, so people do recognize those. Here's a neat old catalog. This one happens to be shoes. Old-fashioned catalogs, especially Art Deco and Art Nouveau period, can be rather valuable. They can sell in the hundreds of dollars. That's something to look for. And then, let's see, we've got a lot of prints here, and she's quite lovely. Calendars. And there's something from the Burlington Northern Railroad. That would have been something given out right when they first merged. The Burlington Northern was a merger of 4 railroads in 1970. And by 1971, all of those railroads were no longer providing passenger service. So this was done right when they came out and would have been given to kids riding on the train back in 1970. So there's actually not a lot of those around. The Olympics, this is an entire kit that Sanka put out, and it's got all sorts of swag and then a big fold-out pop-up with various Olympic sports. And this one was done for the 1980 Olympics, which didn't happen for us because we boycotted them. Now, this is a really nice piece. This is painted. This is Middle Eastern. It has a Persian feel to it. I see pieces like this from the Persian part of India as well. And these are really nicely done. I can't read the language, so I can't tell you exactly what it says. But again, it's talking about something that happened in a particular place in time that is over now. So it does actually constitute ephemera. And it's really attractively done. I think that sold for about $30 as well. Old airline stuff, I understand they're not going to make 747s anymore. Northwest Orient isn't called Northwest Orient anymore. That, by the way, is a hat that you see there. Those were paper hats given out at the 1974 World's Fair in Spokane to celebrate the Chinese pavilion. A lot of times people are interested in ephemera because it's local to an area, and in this particular case, we were in Seattle doing this show, and there's collectors of paper ephemera in just about every town in America and probably around the world, things that happened in your area or things that are interesting to you. In this case, Seattle had the Seattle World's Fair, so you see the Space Needle, you see a bunch of those little striped cards in the middle towards the bottom there are World's Fair tickets. That's what you use to get into the World's Fair. And there's a lot of collectors for that sort of stuff at a few dollars each. Then we get into sports, and sports ephemera, very collectible as well. That's one thing I love about ephemera is it crosses so many different collecting categories. So there's something for a lot of different people in this. So you've got an old football program, you've got how to improve your softball, you've got a reel from the sport parade. Here's All-State versus All-Seattle, back when high school football was what you got. And then these are the little lobby cards that you would see, the little tiny sheets that they would put in very small town theaters where you didn't have a big marquee, but you just have this sitting in a little box at the front of the place. So those are neat. And down here we have President Nixon bumper sticker. Bumper stickers are absolutely ephemeral, and they really come out starting in the 60s, and you see a lot of them in the 70s. And then we get into some cruise ship stuff. And then we get back here, we've got an entire case full of various musical related things. So from old shows like Susanna in 2 acts, you've got recipe books. Those are ephemeral in that they are put out for a certain generation and a certain type of recipes. In some of those you can read about interesting things that people used to do, like making squirrel brains and such things. Most people don't eat those nowadays. Not that I'm judging. I understand from my friend's grandfather that squirrel brains were delicious. I'm going to take his word for it. These are really neat because these are advertising posters, and these are something that would look great under black light, and these are for trips to Hawaii, again, late 60s, early 70s. Someone ended up buying these for $50 a piece. They are pretty collectible. Over here you have something related to Watergate because, again, political ephemera. There are a lot of interesting Watergate collectibles, and this one is one of the most, well, in your face, I guess you would say, because it shows various people associated with the Watergate cover-up, and the one that hasn't been apprehended, according to this poster, of course, is President Nixon. That was a big, difficult time in American politics. Now, these are great menus from cruise ships that went to Hawaii in the 1940s on the left and the 1950s on the right. There's a few different artists who did these. They're all collectible. A lot of people frame these. Postcards also fall into the ephemeral aspect because a lot of them are done for a particular holiday. So we had a good selection of those. And the mall still does have a lot of good ephemera. Epic does have quite a bit, and actually it's something I look for all the time. This particular piece I think is really great. This is a teaching chart, and I got this in West Virginia. This one is from, I believe, the early 60s, and it shows all the different things you're going to learn. So you start right out with the basic 4 food groups, which was a pretty new concept at that time. And then it gets into all sorts of things with anatomical charts, and it was a pretty neat thing. It sold for $100. Here we go with some less racy pinups. These are, I believe, Antonio Varga. You'll see Varga and then Vargas. He worked for Esquire, and when he left them, they had the right to his name, so the ones that are plural, I believe, are after his Esquire years. This is a neat thing to see all intact. And then we have these. I just have to show these again. Like I said, this set, I bought it, I put it aside. I didn't get it out until the show in Mount Dora last month, and I put it out and it sold immediately. And then we've got photos, and photos are a different kind of ephemera because they're ephemera from our lives. You've got a lot that are fun and interesting because you've got all the people who distributed Country Gentlemen at a particular time. Here are stereo cards. The black and white set there are all of the ones that was Mr. Sears of Sears and Roebuck on there. A lot of tin types. Again, these are capturing a moment in time. They were not intended necessarily to last 130 or 140 years. And here they are. So we get to see all these wonderful people, and we may not know who they are, but at least their likeness is preserved for posterity. And let's see, I think that we are getting close to the end here, but I did like this greeting card. I want to mention that because it's neat when you see things that haven't been printed on. A lot of times printing companies would do overruns, so you end up with blanks like that. Interesting photography of various people's trips. People really look for places like Valdez, Alaska, where there was a big landslide and the original town is gone. So they look for pictures of the town before it disappeared and had to be rebuilt. And then holidays. Well, we're at Christmas time, and there's nothing like Christmas things, great ephemera, Valentine's. This is a nice mechanical fold out that I'm attempting to fold out here with great die cut from Germany. And then we've got scrapbooks. Scrapbooks are a great place to find ephemera, and a lot of the glue that they use can be soaked off or steamed off. So just because something's in a scrapbook doesn't mean it's ruined. Lots of little oddball things. You can see there's an A&W root beer, free root beer card. That was something that expired in the 1940s. Somebody just had them in a desk drawer, and there's A&W collectors. So there you go. You've got Thanks America from the USO, from the Second World War era. Newspapers are another area that are interesting ephemera. You've got everything from the Man on the Moon to the Daily Intelligencer from 1900. And then this is neat. This one is actually a college certificate showing that someone has become a fellow. I don't know exactly what being a fellow means. I've heard of fellowships, so I know it's some sort of a designation where you're part of a group of people. This one's got a great frame, and the graphics are interesting, and so people will collect these even if it's not someone related to them, just because they find it interesting that someone achieved this thing in their lifetime. Those are carte de vistas, or cabinet cards they're also called. That was sort of a bridge between snapshot photos and the tin type. And then you've got old sporting teams here. Let me get out of the way so you can see those guys a little bit more. There's sailors on board a deck of a ship. All of these collect a moment in time and preserve it for us, and that's what's interesting to people about all this stuff. And Halloween, what a great graphic. Again, these were things meant to be used for a year. They'd put cellophane tape on them, they'd hang them in a window, kids would rip them down. They were not really intended to last. You can see this one has a few tape tears on it, but it's a pretty hard thing to find in good condition. So we'll take it. And a little bit more, there's a Disney pennant underneath that we saw for just half a second there. So, yes, lots of fun. This was a really fun show and a neat event to do, and I hope we get to do something like this again, because ephemera is just so interesting to so many different people, and it's really fun for me. And so with that, we're going to go back to me here today. And I'll just say thank you for coming on this flashback with me. I'm going to continue to do these through our first 20 videos that we were not doing premieres for, because it's a chance to go back and look at things a little differently, and particularly this video to slow down and take a look at some things we missed the first time around. So thanks for joining me. I'm George the Antique Nomad on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and of course here on YouTube. And we'll see you again soon. Bye for now. Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community, here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below Click the bell to be notified when new videos upload. Leave a comment below and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media daily posts and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.